This morning we're going to discuss the two things that they say never to discuss, politics and religion. And I think the first thing we have to understand, we think maybe in our minds that they're two different total subjects, but the reality is they're the same thing. Religion and politics is just a belief system that we believe that a certain political party or a certain way of governing is better than others. And religion, the same thing. A certain religion is a better way of governing or worshiping or praising God. Because the Buddhists, the Hindu, the Catholics, the Christians, everybody thinks their religion is right. And so do the Democrats and the Republicans, and they'll support their party to the nth degree, no matter what that person does, how dysfunctional it is. Jesus has made it very, very clear to me that in his kingdom there is no political parties, there's no nothing. It's a dictatorship. And that's, I think, one of the things that draws us away from wanting to worship God in the way that we have to worship him, and that is in spirit and truth if we're really going to be his. Because we all want our own decisions. We want to be able to vote the way we want to vote, whether it's Republican or Democrat, or if you're in Mexico, PRI or PAN, or for a guy like AMLO. The long and short is, in the kingdom of God, we don't get those rights. We have to obey. And Jesus comes in and lays down the law real clear that if, and remember it's an if, he doesn't make you obey. He doesn't hold your head underwater and torture you until you say, okay, God, I'll do it your way. He just basically steps out and says, this is the way it is in my kingdom. And if you want to be part of it, you have to do it my way. The good thing about it is the dictatorship is not like what we see in this world where, like Adolf Hitler, where they're evil and they do things to try to destroy the people and take all the money from them. It's very, very different. He brings peace, he brings joy, he brings true love. Everything that's in his kingdom is perfect and righteous, and that's why he dictates and demands that you do it his way. And those that don't want to do it his way don't get in, whether it's the kingdom that wells up inside of you here on earth or the kingdom in heaven, which the two are the same. You can't enter into the kingdom of heaven unless you've entered into the kingdom here on earth. And the only way you can do that is through obedience to Jesus. Me speaking this is one thing, living it's another. It's easy to say, okay, I'll obey Jesus, but we get into the deals of life and we just completely forget everything. We have to keep our mind focused every single step, every single second of every single day, capturing every thought and keeping attentive to God and getting rid of those that we know aren't of God. In a previous video, I discussed the whole thing of, hearing God and knowing that it's God. And, Jesus put on my mind in John chapter 10 where he says, my sheep hear my voice and they follow me. And they don't know the voice of the enemy and they don't follow him. That one confused me for a long time, but Jesus cleared it up by saying, it's not really that you don't know his voice, because you do hear it. You just don't know it because you don't want to follow it, because you know it leads to unrighteousness and problems. And when he's saying you don't know the voice of the enemy, he's basically saying you don't follow it because you know where it leads. But you do hear Satan and you do hear God, whether you realize it or not. The difference is we have to learn to differentiate in our mind when we hear certain voices or certain thoughts that come into our mind, capturing them and figuring out, is this of God or is this of Satan? And leaning on other Christians that really have gotten to the point where they know God, like myself and many others, and finding out whether what they're hearing is of God or not. Because keep in mind, the ways of God are very different than the ways of the world. And we find out real quick as we're following Jesus that what we thought was right is wrong, and what we think is wrong is actually right. And so it becomes very confusing at first. And even with that, there's been many times over the years of being married to my wife, almost 9 years now, where we've had discussions. For example, one of the last ones was, I've been telling her for years that love is a decision, it's not a feeling. And she could never grasp that, even though I told her that, and she didn't believe me. But now that she's really searching God and coming to know Him, she understands it. It's one thing to hear something, it's another thing when it comes from God and He puts that wisdom in you. And it's not really necessarily Him explaining things, it's you come into obedience and you make a choice to do things His way, and then the understanding comes almost, well, it is supernatural. And that's where success comes, is when you start understanding what God's after and you do it His way, then everything else is given to you. And again, seek first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, which all of everything I'm saying right now, always in these videos, is the righteousness of God. And then everything else will be given to you.